So I just want to begin. Welcome, Stewart, to the VLC Field School and participating in this and letting us be in your home. And if you want to tell us, starters, just your full name and a little bit about yourself.
Okay, thank you for doing the interview. And my name is StewartDempsey. I'm a horticulturist and a shop owner. I've lived here in Walnut Hill and in this house from 1988. That's when we moved in.
So what attracted you to the neighborhood and to this home?
That's interesting because this wouldn't have necessarily been a neighborhood I would have moved to. It was really more about the house. And actually, when we were looking for houses, we looked all over the place on the east side in Madison, because I'm from Madison. And I knew I wanted something, an older home, a large home that needed some work. I was never thinking I was going to get, 4,000 square feet of absolute ruins to start with. It was, really bad. And the neighborhood was really bad. In 88, this was the height of the Milwaukee crack epidemic, and all of the vacant lots had houses on them. There were apartment buildings on Lisbon on our corner, and everything was occupied. So it was just like tons and tons of people, and like noise, and millions of kids, and so it was really a very different neighborhood than it is now.
Did you see when you looked at the house like this, like what it could be, the potential?
Sure. All of the architectural details were still here. They needed a lot of work. But I didn't even want to see the inside. I just said, well, keep driving, because it was not exactly what I had envisioned as the house I wanted to work on and live in. So, but ultimately we set up an appointment with the realtor and saw the inside, and it was interesting because you walk in the front door and the staircase was pretty much the way it is, except the hallway was painted sort of dark magenta, and it needed some work, but it basically looked like that. But then from there it started falling apart because the house had been divided up for a rooming house, and there were a lot of those walls and extra bathrooms and sinks and everything still here from the 1940s, when they did that work. And everything was in very bad shape.
You've been here for over 20 years?
Yeah, 26.
Okay. What were a few of the major remodeling? Did you see any original inlays, fixtures that you wanted to leave alone or just fix up? What were the few of the renovations?
Well, because just about everything was still here, we really tried to preserve those elements and make sure that we kept everything that was original. And the projects, almost all of the woodwork was painted, so it all had to be stripped to the wood. And I think the biggest thing was really, just getting rid of the stuff that had been added later and peeling back the layers and getting back to the original. Some things did have to be remade, like the tile floor in the kitchen. It was so badly damaged because they put walls over it and nailed right through the tile, which then just shattered. So I had to redo all of that. But yeah, everything in this house was pretty major because everything is such large scale. And like even the outside, you basically, except for the basement windows, you can't reach anything without a ladder, even the first floor windows, because they're so high up. So it was a lot of work. From the top down, we started with the roof, which had been leaking for years, and then just started working our way down.
And the acreage that eventually bought up, like the acre around the home, and what was like the progression of that? Like, what acreage did you have in the beginning, and just fixing up to the beautiful landscape that you have now?
Well, there was a large lot that came with the house. Originally, the house had 4 acres, and in 1896, when 32nd Street came through, the owner had to move the house, and at that time decided to divide up the acreage and created 31 lots that they built houses on. He personally had the houses built on this block and then sold the rest of the lots off. But they retained a large portion for many years, and when we moved in, it had been whittled down. There was a house directly to the north of us. We had 3 feet of property on that side, and then a duplex beyond that. And on the south side, there was a large duplex that had been torn down before we moved in. And we had found out that the city had a program in this neighborhood in particular, that if you're an adjoining property owner and it's a city-owned vacant lot, you can purchase that for $1. So we knew we could buy the city-owned lot to the south where the duplex was, and that was a big incentive of buying the house, because we felt like the more property we had, the better buffer we'd have against the neighborhood, because the neighborhood was just really troubled at that time, and so we just felt like more property would be a good thing and make it easier for us to handle it.
And when you say like a buffer, and you also said that over time the neighborhood improved, and did you see yourselves, like at the beginning, just like in your space, in your home, in around your home, and is there, did you seem like you can participate more in the neighborhood? Do you go to like neighborhood meetings, or?
In the beginning, Jerry was particularly involved in the neighborhood. He was on the board of CAUSA, and then worked with Land, which were 2 organizations in the neighborhood trying to help improve things. My involvement really came more early on with the kids, trying to get the kids on this block at least to be a little more respectful about things. And it was an interesting experience, because once you got to know the kids, really, you can prevent a lot of the troublemaking that they might otherwise, do. And actually, a lot of the kids became very protective of this property in the very beginning. And partly because, I would help them repair their bikes and build go-karts and do all this stuff that there weren't a lot of father figures around. And not that I was pretending to be a father figure, but just I think they appreciated having somebody pay attention to them. And so it sort of turned out that they would be very, proactive in making sure that if it looked like somebody was going to, do any damage or come in the yard when they weren't supposed to, they would kind of yell at other kids and stuff like that. So, it worked out. It was a sort of a balanced relationship in that sense.
Did you, when that first series of interactions started, did you approach them, or they were kind of like approaching you, saying hi? Or
yeah, what? Kids will always just ride by on their bikes or whatever, and then sometimes the big question always was, is that a whole house? That's how they put it, instead of a single family house. Around here they call it a whole house instead of a duplex or a 4-family or whatever it might be. So that was always the first question, is that a whole house? And then they'd say, is that a mansion? And then they'd say, how many bedrooms? They always wanted to know how many bedrooms there were. So that was always a conversation starter, because the kids will always ask those questions.
Yeah, and does that continue now with, the next generation of kids?
Not as much, because the first experience was all African American. This was really an African American neighborhood. And when we moved in, there were one or two Hmong families that had started moving in. And there was a lot of resentment from the African Americans that were here, and the Hmong experienced a lot of discrimination that we could openly see. But soon after we moved in, the neighborhood started transitioning, and it became more and more Hmong. And the one thing about the Hmong kids is that they really pretty much keep to themselves, and they stay very near to like their own property. They might just ride their bikes on the block, but they weren't as, and to this day are not as open to talking to people and getting involved in things as the African American kids were.
And how much, around the home and, the work involved. I remember coming here last week and, doing a lot of the housework not housework, but like the yard work. And it seems that you really take care of the landscaping, and has that progressed over time? Like you add, more like gardening, and, how did that progress over time?
Well, it's because I'm a horticulturist and I do garden design for a living. I never have been able to do a garden plan for this property because we kept getting more pieces, and then so you'd have to completely reconfigure what you were thinking about when you only had a certain piece, and then all of a sudden you got another chunk added. So it's been really a difficult thing to just sort of integrate it so it all looks like one piece of property. And I think the last thing that happened was when we purchased the duplex next door and had that torn down. That sort of formed this continuous piece of property, and I was able to sort of keep adding to the landscape and at the same time figuring out ways to make it look like one piece. And I mean, it really wasn't that long ago, but you wouldn't really know that hasn't been our property since we moved in, except the size of some of the trees. They're a little bit smaller than some of them on this side. So.
And the duplex that was torn down, and I know you and Jerry know like some of the history of the home, and that when it was first built in the first so many years that they had like I think a German like servant woman coming for the day, and learning about the history, what was most interesting to you and how they used that space years ago?
You mean this house or the duplex that we...
This house, how it was set up, and she would come over and they lived on the next door.
Well, the way that actually worked was that this house was, of course, the original house, Villa Urig on 34th, was built in 1853, so that was the first house in the neighborhood. But then this house was the first one in the developing neighborhood, so that was 1883. But in 1897, when the house was moved to this location, for 3 years it sat here as the only house on the new street. And at that time, that's when the family made the decision that their eldest daughter had rheumatoid arthritis, and she couldn't really not get up the stairs here anymore, and there was just the bathroom on the second floor. And so they decided to build that duplex to the north for her, and then she had the whole first floor, so she didn't have to go up any stairs. And her daughter, who was maybe very young, maybe 3 years old, she lived here with her grandpa and grandma, and then just would go back and forth between the houses. And the servant that we're talking about lived in the house here, and then she would just go over and help out. They, from what we can tell, is they shared a servant, just a woman who had come over from Germany.
Mm. And now with the renovation of your home and what do you, and we see like a lot of artwork that, there's that appreciation of arts, and, do you entertain a lot? Do you use like, the space in the home? What do you use most, or?
Well, when we're home alone, I mean, we use about 3 rooms in this whole house. I mean, it's ridiculous to have a house this size. But it is a nice house for having people over, especially in the summer with the gardens. And we've tried to have the house and yard produce some good by having nonprofit organizations have events here that helps, fundraise for them. So, it's been fun that way, and it's also just, I always say that the only time I can actually enjoy the house and the yard is when I have people over, because otherwise I can't sit down and appreciate it and enjoy it. And, I just don't have time. I mean, I'm either working or I'm working in the yard, and it's just hard to just sort of sit back and say, oh, this is beautiful, and take time to do that. So it's really when other people come over that I'm able to, or allow myself to, just really appreciate the work that I've done.
So it seems like, have you had a lot of nonprofits use the space here?
Quite a few over the years. We allowed some of the neighborhood organizations in the beginning, and then we moved on to some larger nonprofits who have done things. We were approached to have this be one of the symphony show houses, and that we just said no, because it wouldn't be a big enough draw for them. I mean, I think too many people would be afraid to come here.
Can you expand more on Symphony Show House? What exactly?
Well, they have just like there's the breast cancer show house. There's something that the symphony does every year, every couple of years, where they have someone offers their house up, and for like 4 weeks they have to be out of the house, actually. And the designers come in and they kind of like redo the rooms and whatever. And I wouldn't really want them to come in and change everything. So, I mean, we've never particularly taken that seriously. We've always said no.
And about this house, have it registered on the National Historical Places?
No. It's eligible because we've actually gotten historic preservation tax credits for some of the work. And I just decided that I didn't want to have it listed, because even though it's sort of an honor and it's something that the house should have during my tenancy, I guess I feel I do everything possible to stay within the guidelines of the national, of the standards for historic preservation. And you basically, when it is a listed property, you have to apply for and get permission before you do any projects. And so there's always this delay time, and there's always that chance that they'll say no, even though I can't see how they would, because I would be doing it historically appropriate. But that's one of the reasons, is just to avoid the paperwork. And at one point we thought, well, then you don't qualify for tax credits, but that is not true. You just have to be eligible for the National Register, which you go through a similar process of sending in paperwork and documentation. And if they deem that it is an eligible property and it's not listed, you still can get the tax credits.
Seems like there's a lack of practicality. If you need to do a repair, then, you just can't go out and get what you need.
True, but, there's... if you look at some other historic districts, such as Sherman Boulevard over here, people just don't pay attention to it. Even though they might be a contributing house, they'll just go ahead and do something. And there's not really a lot of teeth in the law anyway. I mean, theoretically, they can tell you, you have to reverse this, you have to take those windows back out and put appropriate ones in, but they don't really enforce it. So to me, it's just not something I want to pursue with the house right now.
What is a particular place in the home that's your favorite, that you're proud of the most?
Well, I always enjoy the library. It's the coziest room in the house. I do like the sunroom because I like to grow plants. It's outside, I guess, mostly in the summertime because I do enjoy the garden.
And what do you like to do? Like once you're inside and you're relaxing, do you like to read? Since you like to be in the library.
I do like to read. A lot of times I'm doing little projects here and there. I do also like to just sort of relax and play the piano when it has a keyboard. Right now it's being repaired, but I spend a lot of time in the parlor playing the piano too.
So you're the piano player.
Yes.
And do you also, when entertaining, play the piano for your guests?
Once in a while, but usually I'm busy entertaining because I also do the cooking and all the serving and everything if we have people over.
What do you like to play?
Whatever. I mean, I like classical music, but I also like more sort of new age and a little bit of the jazz type stuff.
Question. Well, it's more of a, I don't know, it's not really a question, but could you walk us through a typical day in the house, being as descriptive as possible? Because this is just audio, so we want to give the listeners an idea of how the house feels.
Well, a typical day in the house. I think you do have to like old houses to really appreciate living in one because there's so many things that people wouldn't want to put up with, otherwise. For instance, the minute that I get out of bed, you step on the floor and some of the floorboards squeak. And that's, I know something that a lot of people who grew up in an old house and they moved to a new construction, they so appreciate not having all of that noise, So the house actually does have some underlying noises that occur that once you live there long enough, it's almost just like goes away. You don't really hear it, but then when you listen or you hear it, when other people come around and they walk across the floor, you think, boy, that really is loud. So I would experience that immediately, getting out of bed. But one of the things I also think about is, when I wake up and I look around at, the bedroom where I sleep. It's actually, to me, a very beautiful space because it has the bay window, so you get beautiful morning light, and the floors are beautiful, and there's a beautiful chandelier when you're laying there and you wake up. So there's those little experiences to start the day. And then typically, I come downstairs and we've always had dogs. And so you have to deal with the dog immediately because the dog doesn't want to wait for anything. So the dog gets let out and fed. I make coffee. I read the paper, have a little breakfast, kind of get myself together and go to work. I mean, I think the house is used like a normal house in that respect in the morning. Probably coming home in the evening, there's a little more appreciation of walking around and actually experiencing the house more in the way you're talking about. But I don't know. I can't really, I guess, go into poetic detail about the experience of a daily thing, because the daily thing is less of that sort of feel that I think you're after. It's, again, getting back to like when I entertain and, we've cleaned the house and it looks nice and we're going to have people over. There's always sort of that walking through and feeling good about it and just appreciating that it's, at least in my mind, it's a unique kind of a house, and there's a real sense of beauty in the rooms. And I think it's, after people leave, sometimes I'll walk back through and just look, because at night it's fairly magical with like all the painting lights on, and, everything is just, it's a very, very fun experience at night to be in the house, I think.
When you entertain, what is there, and you probably got this over the years, compliments do they, what, is there a particular place in the home that they compliment the most?
I think the art gallery upstairs, because it's just so shocking when people walk in. It's just like, most people haven't seen that floor-to-ceiling stacked paintings like that.
And how, that was, I'm thinking, acquired over time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And are there a particular artist that you and Jerry like?
No, I tend to collect. Jerry doesn't really collect anything. He doesn't really own anything in the house either. I mean, he's a minimalist, and he would not really have anything. So it'll be interesting to see the next house, because I won't be taking most of this stuff with me, I doubt, especially if he wants, a Zen-like thing. And then I thought, well, maybe we'll just get a duplex, and he'll have one floor and I'll have the other, and he can have nothing, and I'll have nicer things. But the art collection, it's really more about me. I've always been interested in art and painting. I took a lot of art in college. I used up all my humanities credits on art and language and music, and it was just, I ended up going an extra year because I wanted to take too many courses. I wasn't concentrating on my basics that I was supposed to have.
And out of all those interests, the horticulture, that was you had the most passion for it.
Well, it won out because I took a course. I liked it. It was for a beginning horticulture course, and it was open to anybody, any major. And then I really wanted to take another one, and the one I wanted to take was only open to hort majors, and they wouldn't let me take it. And so they said, and I persisted with it, and they said, well, the only way you can take it is you have to go to your advisor and you have to change your major to horticulture in order to take the course. And I'm like, fine, I'm doing it. So I did it. And then by the time I realized I really didn't want to have a degree in horticulture, I had way too many credits in horticulture because I liked it. So that's how that happened. It wasn't because I was out set to be a horticulturist.
So if there was like any plants or flowers or greenery around your home that you would want the most, what would it be? Or do you have it already?
Well, I tend to like to try new things, and I tend to push the envelope of hardiness. So I'll get plants that really aren't truly hardy here just to try them and see if I can get them to establish themselves.
Is there a particular plant?
No, I just like unusual evergreens. And the one thing that I've said, though, with having acquired so much property, and an acre is pretty unusual for an urban garden, most people think of a single tree that they're going to put in their yard, and I think of a forest. I can think about all these different trees, and unfortunately at this point, we have so many trees that I've gone from a full sun garden to mostly a shade garden almost everywhere, except for the new area where the trees are still pretty small. But that, I think, just shows the love of and the understanding the value of a tree.
Something else about like the grounds and the home here and entertaining. I thought about if you would ever consider, like by appointment, some homes are like that, or they open up their home for tours. Did you ever consider that, or in the future consider that?
Yeah, I would. One of the things that would probably make the most sense is to be on the Garden Conservancy tour, where certain gardens are open just for a couple days during the year, and it's always a planned event, and they're all over the country. Actually, you can buy the guide and go to the gardens. But I've had requests from some of my garden clubs that I give talks to, and last year the garden club of the Women's Club of Milwaukee came on a garden tour. So yeah, I do that periodically.
And I noticed, a couple of fireplaces. Do you ever operate them, especially in the winter?
Sure, except that they're really for show and not for heat, because the fireplaces are the most inefficient way to heat a space. So this one is gas. It originally was gas. We just put new logs in. But we have the wood stove in the kitchen that we will use for heat as well.
And does the dog ever come? I noticed that the dog doesn't really come up to this area of the home.
The dogs have never been allowed in this part of the house or upstairs. And if the door is open and there's company, he will come in here. But he's not really allowed in the house. And just because we don't want the dog hair, and we've had dogs that are relatively naughty about, nibbling on the furniture and stuff in the past, so we try to keep them relegated to the hall and the kitchen, and that's plenty of space for them.
Do you have any questions?
I have one. What would you say your favorite part of the neighborhood is? Maybe your favorite place to go?
Well, the neighborhood actually doesn't have that many venues or offerings because it's still in transition, and so there's a lot of vacant buildings. Lisbon is really the main retail or thoroughfare, and there's not much there. I would say Amaranth Bakery is a really wonderful place to go, and there's a few other businesses that have sort of sprung up because of that, but really at this point probably there's not anything that I would really walk to, except for Amaranth. And I would love it if this was a walking neighborhood, but it really isn't. And that was one of the things we knew moving here. We'd have to drive everywhere. But I think the other huge asset that this neighborhood has is Washington Park. And, it was here, I think 1896, something like that, or maybe even before. And that's where the original zoo was as well. And I just think people don't... obviously, it's been somewhat modified over the years, but it is designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, and we have 3 parks in this city that are Olmsted designed, which is amazing. And to think we've got one right here, Washington Park. And there's still quite a bit of his original design with the lagoons and the bridges and things like that. But some of it got ruined when they put the zoo in, and then some of it got ruined when they put the freeway in and took the zoo out. Have you been to the Urban Ecology Center there at the eastern edge of the park on 40th Street? There's one thing that I did not know was when they lost the zoo portion for the freeway that goes on the west side of the park, they actually purchased all of the houses and the garages and everything on the west side of 40th Street, and they tore all of those down and made parkland out of it so that they would get some more park back. And I never knew that until, maybe 10, 15 years ago when someone told me, and then I actually started looking into it, and it is true. I mean, now you would think it's always been park, but that wasn't park. It was a whole row of houses on 40th.
Do you go to Washington Park often, like in the summer?
No, unfortunately, I really don't. I mean, I just have this huge yard here, so I just kind of hang out here. Once in a while, we'll go to a concert there, though.
Did you ever, with Amaranth Bakery, have you spoken with the owner, Dave, and swap renovating old home stories? And
Sure. Well, Stephanie, when she was getting that bakery ready to open, she actually worked with me doing landscaping for 4 years. And I kept saying, is there really going to be a bakery? When is this bakery opening? So we had plenty of time to swap stories at that point.
I have a question maybe we could end on.
okay.
It's pretty open-ended. What makes this place home?
I think it's really the amount of energy that I've put into it to, and it's a unique house in that since everything was here, I really wanted it to reflect the date of construction or, at least look historic. And so I took a lot of pains to pick historic wallpapers and finishes and trying to bring back things, little bits of things that, were remaining to make sure that, it was this experience from when you first came in the door. And it's something that I always wanted. I always enjoyed old houses. And I guess that would be the best way to answer that. For me, I've always felt like I was born in the wrong century. That somehow I have this connection to these old structures and old things. And so to me, they really create a sense of warmth and just make me happy when I'm around them. And so that sort of means home to me.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Stewart, for the interview and, just letting us get to know you better in your home. And so thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good luck with your project.
Thank you.